Thank you, everyone, for coming to this plenary. It's my pleasure to introduce Philippe Aghion, who is a man who needs no introduction. He's one of the most influential economists of his generation. He's a professor at Collège de France, INSEAD, and the LSE, and his work has fundamentally changed how we think about economic growth, innovation, and business dynamism, although he's made fundamental contributions to a lot of other fields. Therefore, it came as no surprise to many of us that he won the 2025 Nobel Prize in Economics, which he won for advancing our understanding of the role of creative destruction in economic growth. On a personal note, when I say it came at no surprise, I should add that the organizers of the Growth and Productivity Workshop predicted the Nobel Prize because the Friday before he won, we texted that if we wanted him as a keynote at the BSc this year, that Friday was the time to ask, because at Monday he may well win the Nobel Prize, and so he did. So I'm thrilled to have Philippe Aghion, and please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Thank you so much, Martin, and the organizer for inviting me to deliver this lecture. This is very intimidating. I can tell you that all what happened this year, I was totally unexpected. On the 12th of October, there was a baptism of the nephew of a friend, and I was all into that, you know, and I went to bed on the 12th of October and not being sure that nothing would happen the day after. I must say also that, yeah, anyway, so that it's true that a month earlier, 3 weeks earlier, I was in Sweden for a honorary degree, and some of my hosts, which were also on the committee, sent me a note saying, "Can you send me half a page describing your work, you know, because we have no clue what you are doing, you know." And so they did a very good job at, you know, brouiller les pistes, as we say in French. Voilà. Anyway, so that's... today I had a fantastic day, you know, wonderful papers, and it all owes to what you are doing. And I must say that without, you know, if I worked with, co-authored with, you know, younger, you know, the young generation, your generation, nothing would have happened. And so I don't want to be too long telling about my life. I have to say that my father wanted to do social revolution in Egypt. He came from a rich Jewish family of Alexandria, but they were surrounded by illiteracy and extreme poverty. So he decided to invent a communist party, but that didn't work too well. And he had a cousin who tried to do another communist party. At the time, he was, you know, you don't have Wolof Palme, and social democracy didn't exist. He didn't know quite that, but there was this obsession with poverty. And I grew up in this as well. I mean, said, you know, I want to do something helpful and to get people out of poverty. And that's what got me into growth. And I think it's the mixture of this motivation and having done some math, having studied some math, the combination of the two got me into economics. And that's how I got into economics. And I wanted to work in growth economics. But as you know, in my students' days, the leading model was the solo growth model, the neoclassical growth model, where growth is driven by capital accumulation. You produce a flow of wealth with a stock of capital, and you save part of the wealth that you produce to increase the stock of capital, which allows you to produce more tomorrow. Solo was aware of the fact that there are decreasing returns to capital accumulation. You increase production much less when you move from 9 machines to 10 machines than when you move from 0 machine to 1 machine. And he knew that if you wanted to have sustained long-run growth, you needed something else, which was technical progress. But Solo would not tell you where technical progress comes from. So here, but you know, I had heard about Schumpeter's idea of creative destruction, but in my students' day, it was a mondanité, it was a curiosity. You would come across creative destruction in a course on the history of economic thought or in an IO class, but it would be en passant. and there was nothing much. So in fact, with Peter Howitt, whom I met at MIT in '87, Peter was visiting from Western Ontario for a year, and he was supposed to work on something different, on employment and search, and not at all on growth. And Blanchard and Diamond, Peter Diamond had invited him, and I stole Peter from them. And I said, Peter, why don't we try to write from scratch, a new model that encompasses Schumpeter's notion, and where we try to open the black box of the solo residual, because you remember there was this idea of the solo residual. It was, what is in there? Bloody solo residual. Okay, so together we developed a model that revolves around three main ideas. The first idea is that long-run growth is driven by a cumulative process of innovation where each innovator builds upon previous innovations. I mean, you always stand on giant shoulders. The second idea is that innovations do not come from heaven. They result from entrepreneurial activities that are motivated by the prospect of innovation rents, of monopoly rents. If I discover a new product or a cheaper way to produce, for a while I get some rents until I'm superseded by subsequent innovators. And the third idea is creative destruction. New innovation displace old technologies. And at the heart of this theory, there is a contradiction. On the one hand, you need innovation runs to motivate innovation investments, R&D and the like. But on the other hand, yesterday's innovators are tempted to use their runs to prevent subsequent innovations because they don't want themselves to be subject to creative destruction. And managing a market economy is largely about how to deal with this contradiction. Whether you talk about secular stagnation, about middle income trap, about inequality, you come across this contradiction over and over again. That's why you have a political economy of growth. From that makes growth, an exciting topic. Voilà. That's where we are. So in a nutshell, I mean, just to, our model in a nutshell, you have final output produced by an intermediate good. So the final output is capital Y, produced by an intermediate input, small y, and capital A is the productivity of the intermediate input in producing final output, is the quality of the intermediate input, okay? And you assume that the final good sector is competitive, that the intermediate input producer is paid at his marginal productivity, but that, of course, the intermediate good sector is not competitive because the current producer has the latest technology and therefore earns a monopoly rent until she or he is replaced by a subsequent innovator. Growth in this model results from quality improving innovations. Each time you have an innovation, you turn A into gamma A, where gamma is greater than 1, and gamma is the size of the innovation, okay? And now, the very simple model, we assume that you would produce the intermediate good 1 for 1 with labor. So 1 unit of labor would give you 1 unit of intermediate input, but you could use labor also to innovate. And we assume a Poisson process. If you use Z units of labor in R&D for dt unit of time, the probability of innovating during this dt in time interval is lambda z dt, and the probability of not innovating is 1 minus lambda z dt. So you have, in fact, an arrival rate. If z is the amount of labor invested in R&D, you have the arrival rate of innovation is Poisson with probability lambda z, and lambda is a parameter that measures the efficiency of the research sector, how productive research is, okay? So in fact, the model revolves around two main equations. One equation would tell you that because that you have labor market clearing, you have a supply of labor of size L, you have a population of size L, and the population can either work in producing the intermediate input or doing R&D. So you have L equal Y, small y plus Z. That's the labor market clearing equation. And then you have another equation, which is a research arbitrage equation. In equilibrium, you must be indifferent between working as a manufacturing worker to produce small y or doing research, investing your unit of flow of labor to try to innovate, okay? And the two equations together, give you an equilibrium R&D, Z investment, aggregate R&D, which depends on the parameters of the model. It's increasing in the productivity of research lambda, it's increasing in the size of innovation gamma, it's decreasing in alpha, which means, and it's decreasing in the interest rate. Any long-term investment is always decreasing with the interest rate. It's the same for R&D, is no exception. And the important thing is that it's also increasing in capital L, in the size of the population. Okay, and then from there, the average, the expected growth rate is just lambda z log of gamma, and that's what we got. And so it's also have exactly the same comparative statistics with respect to the various parameters, and we got this formula lambda z log of gamma. Okay, so we had opened that's the solo residual. The solo residual is that, the productivity growth rate is the product of the arrival rate of innovation, lambda z, and the log of the size of innovation. Alors, Peter Howitt says that the day when we completely solved the model and had this formula, I told him, look, we may have a hit at the Nobel Prize, but I don't know. That's, that's what Peter says. I think he's making it up. Okay. So, of course, this model tells you in particular that you have positive correlation between the turnover rate, lambda z is the rate of creative destruction, and the growth rate, which is lambda z log of gamma. Okay. So, and then you start from there, and you have all kind of things. I don't want to bother you much. So what I would like to do today is to really talk about to get into the debate on the scale effect. You see, we saw that in the basic model, you see the equilibrium R&D, aggregate R&D, and the equilibrium growth rate depend positively on L. You see, that's this thing. I'll try to. It's a pointer that you have to. You have to. Voilà. But so that's what we call a strong scale effect. Okay, and there's been a whole debate with Chad Jones over the past 30 years. In fact, it all started with his paper published in '95. It's already 30 years old, and there's been various stages in that debate. And it's nice to have an ongoing debate with someone I immensely admire and immensely like. And to see how the debate has evolved. So I think it's good in economics to see how debates evolve. And that's a case where I think we converged. I think we have a compromise, it's better than a compromise. I think we got to something which I have a feeling that it's a debate that concluded, which is very positively, but was productive for all of us. So I would like to talk about that. But you see, behind that debate, there is a kind of older debate between two colleagues at Northwestern. One of them is Bob Gordon, who is a wonderful colleague and friend, and the one is Joel Mokyr, who shared the prize this year with us. He was another great friend. So they're both great friends of us, and they're friends between themselves. So all this is between people who very much like each other. Sometimes you argue with people that, you don't. You say you like them, but, those are wonderful, wonderful scholars and wonderful human beings. And you see, Gordon, his view of the growth process was kind of more pessimistic, because he viewed innovation and growth like a fruit tree, like the nice fruits you get easily. And then you have to climb, and you get the kind of bitter fruits. You see, you may fall, and you get the bitter fruits. And he felt that, somehow the steam engine revolution was a very big deal. It made growth take off. The growth take off is the steam engine revolution in the 19th century in England, and then France, and then elsewhere. And then it was electricity, which was still a big deal. But then IT he perceived as less of a big deal. But it was before AI. So now you have to ask him, what do you think about the AI revolution? But his view was really the fruit tree idea. And in a sense, we will get to that. Chad was a bit on that side also, with this idea that ideas are harder to find. And we will get back to that, okay? So that's that side. The more optimistic side is the Joel Mokyr side. Joel Mokyr, the idea is that new paradigm keep emerging, okay? So he has this quote in his Nobel lecture: a firm may run into diminishing returns, but new entries of young and hungry firms and the exit of old and tired firms inject fresh oxygen into the innovation process. And so what we'll do here is to see who is right and who is wrong, and maybe they're both right, in fact. And we will argue that both of them are saying something that we can agree with, and they can be more like it's solved by a synthesis. You see, there is a synthetic answer. That's what I will try to propose here. Okay? So we will revisit this debate between Bob Gordon and Joe Mokyr, both theoretically and empirically. Alors, theoretically, it's very much it's based very much on joint work with Jean-Félix, who is here, and it owes enormously to Jean-Félix, and Antonin Bergeau, Timo, and myself. Voilà. And so I will start talking about that. Will be the theory side, and on the empirical side, it's based on work we did with Gaëtan de Rassenfoss, Antonin Bergeau, and two PhD students at Luc Paluchevich and Raphaël Vargon in Paris, where we look at economic ideas in economics. So we talk about ourselves. We'll be a bit nombriliste, a bit, comment on appelle ça? Voilà. So let me first, talk about the theory part. So the theory part, you have the first, what we call the first generation of innovation-based models. You have the model that I just outlined, the model with Peter. You have the Romer 1990. They have in common the fact that, the equilibrium growth rate depends upon the size of the population. So they both have this feature that you have a strong scale effect, which means that if you were to have population growth, you would have explosive growth. Okay? That's the thing. So, and that's an undesirable prediction. It's a counterfactual prediction because Jones, it's in his well-known paper, 1995, what he shows is that he said, but look, if you look at TFP growth in the US, it's always around like 2%, there is no trend upward or downward, but the number of effective researchers has gone up. And so it's like the capital L going up and still growth not going up. So this is at odds with the prediction with the endogenous growth model. Okay. So then Chad went further in that paper, and he proposed what he called a semi-endogenous growth model. And he said that, in fact, you see, instead of assuming that A is a productivity parameter, that A dot over A is a function of population, of L, okay, I will say that there are decreasing returns with respect to the current knowledge. The more knowledge you accumulated, the slower will be your growth, okay? That's the thing. It's that you have this phi here is less than 1. Okay, and so what he does, instead of assuming phi equal 1 would be, gets you back to the first generation of endogenous growth model. And he said, I will assume that there is a phi less than 1. And that model leads you to a growth rate, which is a long-run growth rate, which is just the rate of population growth n divided by 1 minus phi. So, of course, the advantage is that that's in line with the picture that I showed before. But the problem with this is that there is no effect of policy. The policy has no effect there. You see what I mean? And we are all after growth policy. No, in Barcelona, in Europe, we want to have a growth wake up. But then you could say, well, you could still have that during the transition phase, but not in the long run. But it's never solo. Also, the solo model. Also, you could say you can have effects on the transition path. So that's the undesirable part, is that you are drowning the baby, in the dirty water. You lose the baby with the dirty water. So you have this expression in English. Je jette le bébé avec l'eau sale du bain. What is the English way of saying it? Yeah. Okay. So then came, as a response to this concern, you had a second generation of innovation-based endogenous growth model. Most notably, you had Howitt, you had Alwyn Young, 1998, you had Pareto, 1998, and you had Peter Howitt, JPE paper in 1999. And the basic idea there is to say, well, your aggregate productivity is, in fact, the average of productivities over a number of varieties. And in fact, what happens is that as population grows, in fact, what will happen is that the researchers, they will spread over the varieties. You see what I mean? All what will happen is that the number of varieties will increase, but that doesn't bring anything to growth. Growth is still quality driven, quality improving driven. You see what I mean? So all just what happens is that you know, instead of having one brand of perfume, you have 10 brands of perfume. I told you that's my mother there, perfume and fashion. Okay, so and you spread the growing number of researchers spreads over the number of a growing number of varieties. Aggregate productivity growth is still constant and endogenous, equal to its average over all varieties. And population growth, all what it did is to increase the number of varieties. But that doesn't bring anything to aggregate growth. And that was the thing, that's the thing. And, but the one feature of this model is that at the variety level, ideas are not harder to find. At the variety level, you have constant growth, constant endogenous growth. You see what I mean? So that was a response to Jones. Is to say, in fact, they spread over a bigger number of variety, but at the variety level, you know, ideas are not harder to find. In response to that, that's my interpretation. Chad said, you know, it's like at tennis. You never went to a final. I was Roland Garros last week. Tack, 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 you know. As a problem is that blue metal comes, you see. So Chad enrolls Nick, John, and Michael Webb into an exercise. I always make the joke that I never know what they were getting into. Me, I knew very well what Chad was after. I don't know if they knew right away what they were into. But the paper is a beautiful paper, and I love to teach that paper. So it's great that they produced it. But I had my own idea of what it had been written in the first place. Is to say, even at the variety stage, ideas are harder to find. You see what I mean? And that was a response to the second generation. Okay? So they say, well, look, for example, look at the production of chips. You see, you have Moore's law. You see that every so and so, you know, you double the number of chips. I think that every I don't know how many years you double the number of chips in Moore's law. I forgot about that. But the thing is, what they show is that you need 18 times more researchers than you needed in the early 1970s to double the number of transistors per chip. You see what I mean? So you still have Moore's law, but to get Moore's law, you need to hire more and more and more researchers. So you can see that even if you look at the narrow, you know, chip production sector, transistor, you know, you have. You know, ideas are harder to find. You have a decreasing productivity of research because the growth is constant, but you need an increasing number of researchers to achieve it. So it means that research productivity is going down even at the sectoral level. And they look at other sectors as well. It's a beautiful paper. You look at the growth, the corn, agriculture. The yield growth is not, you know, it's essentially constant. It doesn't show any upward trend, but the effective number of researchers in, you know, in agriculture increases, and you have exactly the same phenomenon if you look at agriculture. They also look at molecular, you know, at biotech. You have research productivity is going down, the effective number of researchers is going up. So that's the thing of the paper, and the paper is beautiful, and it goes sector by sector. That was their answer to the second generation. So what we do there, okay? And there we come with Jean-Félix and our co-authors, is to say, well, you know, in our paper, and Jean-Félix will present in detail the paper tomorrow. So I just give you the basic hints, the basic, you know, so it's just the teasing. You have, the idea is that you have diminishing returns on to development within a product line. But research continually introduces new product lines with fresh development opportunities. So you reset the innovation clock. Within ideas, you go down, but you have new ideas which are, in fact, better than others. You see what I mean? You need to go, and they go up, because the new ideas have more potential than the old ones. But within an idea, you have decreasing returns. Okay, and that's the thing. So that's a way to reconcile Jones et al.'s intuition with the endogenous growth. To say you still, and I will show a bit more detail, is that within any line, indeed, you have the decreasing returns, but you keep finding new new areas. I'll just show a few theoretical slides, but the details you will have tomorrow, and then I will move into economics. Okay? So, so the idea there is that on each line, development opportunities, what you have development opportunities, but they are eventually exhausted. So what happens is that when people who develop the line, at some point they face an obsolescence shock, which prevents them from continuing to develop the line. They run out of ideas, okay? And when they run out of ideas, given that the rest of the economy is growing, at some point they become unprofitable and they leave the market, okay? And so, but this exit opens the door to entrants who introduce new product lines through research, unlocking a new wave of development opportunities. And under suitable conditions, the resulting cycle of research, development, and eventual obsolescence delivers a continuous stream of temporary innovation opportunities that can sustain long-run growth. So just to show, so for example, we give the example of camera. You see, you have me when I was a child. You are too young. You had a film inside the camera, and you have to develop to go to a store to have the film developed. And after 1 week, you would get ugly photographs most of the time, and that's what happened. You see what I mean? And but then you see. So, but at some point, well, of course, you had increasingly better cameras, but at some point, film-based imaging exhausted, and research delivered a fundamentally new product, the digital camera, which opened up new avenues for subsequent development, sensor technology, image processing, software-driven features. So the overview, the basics of the model with Jean-Félix is that you have a representative household who consumes products and supplies labor, and there is population growth, like in Jones' model, okay? And then you have several kind of agent. I mean, when you are a firm, you develop your line. So you have a firm is a line of research, okay? You hire labor to produce, but you can also hire labor to increase your gamma. You see the gamma, the extent by which you improve. So you can hire labor to develop faster your line. You can either labor to produce or to develop your line faster. But you are hit. There is a random obsolescence shock. You at a certain Poisson rate, you are hit by a shock, and you can no longer innovate on your line. And at some point, you exit. That's the firms that are already there. So firms that are already there, there are those who can still innovate on their line, and that's called a new firm, and then they become old the day they can no longer innovate, and at some point they exit. And you have the potential entrants that discover new products. When they discover new products, they turn into what we call incumbent lines, into young lines, okay? That's the basic idea. Okay, so I'll show a few, just the math very, very briefly, just a few slides. So you have the population growth, L dot over L equal N. The representative household has the preference log of CT, which means that the Euler equation is R equal rho plus G, okay? And C is a composite, is a CES basket of differentiated products, where QIT is the quality of product I, which you improve, is the gamma. Yeah, that's where it plays the role of the A that I had before, okay? And we assume that you produce 1 unit of CI with 1 unit of labor, okay, 1 for 1. You produce 1 unit of consumption good I with 1 unit of production labor. That's the basic, okay? And then on top, I mean, so the producer can hire labor to produce 1 for 1, but she can also hire labor to increase the rate at which quality QI will go up. You see, you have a Q dot equal gamma Q. So you can increase over time your quality, and the more labor, that's called development labor here, LD, voilà, you see, that's development labor. The higher the LD, the higher will be the rate at which you increase your quality. So you see, you can do two things. You can either hire labor to produce, and also you can hire labor to improve faster the extent by which you improve the quality of your product, okay? And the average quality is just this, where MT is the number of varieties, in the market, okay? And at Poisson rate epsilon, incumbent producers receive an obsolescence shock, the CD, the cost CD there, the cost of development goes to infinity. They can no longer improve the gamma. And because they can no longer improve the gamma, but the rest of the economy grows, at some point, they have to exit the market. Okay, and they, when quality falls below this threshold, because the aggregate quality keeps growing, of course, but then they are stuck at a certain level. Where their quality goes below this Q bar QT, they are out of the market. So now you have the entrants. The entrants, they discover new products through research. And there is the idea that, you know, if I devote capital LR units of labor to research, I discover, I increase the number of varieties, you see, that I produce. I create by the amount MT dot, you see. So I increase the total number of varieties by the number MT dot, which is LR over CR. And where CR measures the efficiency of, because it reflects the efficiency of research. And we assume that when you enter at the same minimum quality at which incumbents leave. Okay, that's okay. So you have here the entrant technology, and they create new lines. Okay, so now you have the various problems. You have the maximization problem of the firms that are what I call young firms, okay? The new firms, we call them, because they are firms that can still innovate. And those firms, you see the Bellman equation, RV minus V dot, which is R minus G V, which is rho V on the left-hand side. So you maximize, and you can see that on the right-hand side, you have three terms. This is profit. So you choose your pricing rule. You choose the amount of labor you devote to production. You choose the amount of labor you devote to developing, to have a higher gamma. I call that development labor, to maximize. Here you have the profits that you make as long as you are there. Tau C is a tax on your final profits. But then if you devote LD to development, you see that will cost you WLD. Tau D is a subsidy to development, and that will to the LD will correspond to gamma of LD, and gamma times Q is Q dot. And so that will be by how much you increase Q times the VT of Q. So that's by how much you increase your value. By how much you increase your value minus the cost of development. And that's the development part. But then you are hit at rate epsilon by an obsolescence shock, and you turn into an old firm. And the old firm, no longer has the, the obsolescence and development terms. You see what I mean? So now when you solve the problem, you get the optimal pricing rule. You have the optimal markup rule. You see price, you can show that it's theta over theta minus 1 times wage. Okay, and you get gamma. You get the optimal gamma, you see. And the optimal gamma will depend, of course, on the rate at which you subsidize development and the CD, which is the cost of development, you see. And that's the optimal gamma. And when you solve the problem of the new firm, you get the pricing rule, which is the usual, and the optimal gamma. And the old firm is the same, but there is no more development, and there is no more obsolescence shock because they already got hit by the obsolescence. They just choose the optimal pricing rule and LTD, but the pricing rule will be exactly the same as for the old firms. It will still be this pricing rule, P equals theta over theta minus 1 W. Okay, and then at the end you have the entrance problem. The entrance you maximize. If you innovate, if you invest LR, you create new varieties in a number LR over CR, and each new variety you start being new at the lowest quality. So that's what you get, minus the cost, the labor cost of research. And the TR here is a subsidy to research. And of course, this is linear in LR, and that leaves you to the free entry condition that in equilibrium you should have this. This is the research arbitrage equation, okay? And we assume that the new entrants start at Q lower bar level. So this model, in fact, in equilibrium, you can show that aggregate consumption is given by this expression, where M grows at the rate of population, you see, and and Q, and the aggregate Q grows at a certain rate, GQ, which will depend on the optimal gamma. And what's nice is that, and that's where we get, in fact, and you will see much more in detail tomorrow, and that's the thin phases with Chad, is that we get the Chad term here. You see n over 1, theta minus 1. But we have, so that's the growth from the variety part. That's a semi-endogenous growth component. But now you have an endogenous growth component, which is the GQ. And GQ is endogenous. And the GQ, you see, when you look at the expression for GQ, you see it is this expression. So it is the equilibrium gamma, because you solve for the equilibrium LD, and the equilibrium LD will give you an equilibrium gamma. So it will be that gamma times, so it's the common quality equilibrium product quality growth rate times the share of firms that are not hit by the obsolescence shock. And that's this term, minus this n times this, because in fact, when you have new entry, you see the new entrants, they start at the lowest possible quality. So that gives you a jump downward. But still, they are higher than the previous entrants. You see what I mean? But you still have, for each entrant, a small downward. That's why you have this minus term here. But you see, and the gamma is the gamma that you solve when you had a new firm problem, maximization problem. And you see that, in fact, in equilibrium, it has this very simple expression. And it depends in particular on the tau D, the CD, and the CR. That's the equilibrium gamma. You see, and so policy, which is the tau D, the tau R, affect growth now. You see, so you have now a model which includes the Jones term, but where policy matters. You see, and if you want to represent graphically, that's why that's one firm. They know that new entrant that became an incumbent firm. So it was a new firm up to there, and oh God, it's a pity that I have a pointer which is really rebel. Voilà. And then you see at this point you stop innovating, but you go up to there, and at that point you exit. You see what I mean? But then you have a subsequent entrant. They start higher because you start at Q lower bar QT of the time where you enter, which is higher than the level at which the previous entrant enters, because capital QT has gone up. You see what I mean? And so another entrant coming subsequently to this one is starting higher, and you see you see here the face, which is continuous. Here is that she's doing development. She's increasing her gamma, but here she stops increasing her gamma. She becomes an old firm up to the point she exits. And the next, you see, but each time the new entrant starts higher. You see, so you have the reset of the innovation clock, and it's the upper envelope, but it's not stagnation. You see, and you can see in particular that if you increase tau D, but you will increase, of course, the equilibrium gamma. So you will make it that developers will, of course, grow their quality at a higher rate. And so that's where you increase gamma. You move from the gray lines to the black lines. And so that gives you overall a higher growth rate. So policy matters. So you have a model that encompasses, that deals with Jones' 1995 concern, where on each line you have ideas harder to find in a very strong way, because each line you are hit by an obsolescence shock, and at some moment we just assume an extreme form that you can no longer innovate, and still at the aggregate you have endogenous growth. Okay, and that's the substance, and Jean-Félix will go into the details of that tomorrow. Okay, so that's where we are coming from. Alors, it relies on three assumptions. Is that entrants draw an initial quality level, which is Q lower bar capital QT, which is proportional to capital QT. Another thing is that entry cost, if you look at the free entry condition, you will see that the entry cost grows with firm level profits and grows with capital QT as well. You see the entry cost also grows with capital QT. And another thing is that new technologies reset the innovation clock. But there is evidence to that. First, there is evidence by Jensen, McCuggin, and Stiro that more recent cohorts of entrants are more productive than older cohorts in US manufacturing. And there is the evidence by Garcia, Marcia, Sie, and Clino that 75% of aggregate growth from product quality comes from product quality by incumbents. whereas this proportion would be 0 if entrants drew from a fixed initial quality. Here it's important that you draw from a quality which is drawing. If it was fixed, if they were drawing from the same quality constant, that prediction of the paper would not be satisfied. And finally, so second, entry cost grow with firm level profit. But UE is here, and you've done UE work with Pete, showing evidence that entry costs rise with growth. And finally, the last one is new technology, reset innovation clock, and that brings me to the empirical part. So now no more math, and now I show you empirics. Are you still alive? You are still alive? Oh, you are fantastic, because now we can harvest, okay? And I can drink some water. Oh, I love that. Okay. So what I present now is very based on joint work with Antonin, Luc Palusiewicz, Gaëtan Drasenfoss, and Raphaël Vargon. It's called the life cycle of ideas. And what we do there is to analyze the evolution of subfields in economics, characterizing the pace at which new topics emerge and the key feature. And what I will show is that we have a method to generate topics in economics, not through JEL. We use machine learning to generate topics, and we show that within topics, essentially the influence of the topic, most of the time is bell-shaped. So that goes in the Jones direction. But they keep having new topics, and therefore, at the aggregate, there is no decreasing returns. Ideas become harder to find. I mean, the basic intuition was that, when I was a student, general equilibrium theory was very much, and then game theory was also very, and it's always important. Those are still very important, and they are general purpose technologies. Then you had, incentive theory, contract theory, and each of these fields, they've been inputs to subsequent, but each field may go through, faster and then less. But if you take the envelope, you keep having growth. Okay, so in fact, you see, what I will do here is to look at the economic literature between 1950 and 2020. And what we do is to use a machine learning algorithm to identify topics based on the textual content, in fact, the abstracts of the papers. And we will obtain a paper topic mapping through that. So we will not use JEL. We will generate the topics endogenously. You see? Are you still, I'm still okay on time? I'm still? 12 minutes left? Oh my God, that's oh my God. 4? No, already? Oh God. Okay, so let me show you okay. So let me tell you how we do. Most of the literature, on science, take JEL classification as starting point. But this approach is not fit for our purpose. JEL codes are assigned after the emergence of a topic, and they are assigned by authors, leading to inconsistent classifications and strategic manipulation. We move away from JEL, and we determine the number of topics and the allocation of paper to topics endogenously. So in fact, what we'll do is that we identify relevant journals. We use textual information on, that we get from the abstracts, authors and citation. And then we use something called the embedded topic model from Dieng et al. To, in fact, generate topics and classify papers into topics to look how papers evolve, okay? So I'm going a bit fast there. But these two slides, I need to go a bit slowly, and then we can harvest, okay? So you fix that first the number of topics. For each paper, the model, using the abstracts, and will estimate a vector of topic shares. You see, so I know, I will know from the abstract how it pertains to various topics, the paper. And I will give some shares, okay? So it cites a lot, okay? And the thetas are the shares. You see how much the topic is important for the paper, okay? Now, each topic is characterized by a topic word distribution, okay? So you have the probability of a word given the topic. It tells you how strongly a word is associated with a topic. Now, a paper with a high weight theta jk is more likely to contain words with high probability of W given K, okay? So in fact, what you can do is that you can predict, starting from an initial theta distribution, you can predict what would be the probability of a word in the abstract of a paper. It should be the sum of the theta jk probability of a word given the topic. So you start from a theta, and you see whether you get back to the abstract you have. If the abstract that you get back to is different from the previous one, you have to update your theta. And you update the theta until you get to a theta star that you are happy with, okay? So the thing is that you keep updating on the thetas, you see, until you predict the abstract that you have initially, okay? And then when you have that, you know that conditional on k, you got the right shares theta jk, okay? That's given the number of topics. Are you still with me there? Yes? I mean, you are fantastic. There is one more slide, and then the rest is easy. And then we said that, well, so let me keep going. So now we let the number of topics vary. In fact, you see, there is a fixed cost of adding a topic. And there is a trade-off between minimizing the distance between articles within a topic and the total fixed cost. Of course, you see, I mean, if I only have one topic, there will be papers very far from each other within the topic. So I rather have topics where I have related papers, but that means I pay more fixed cost. And there is another thing also. You have the problem, what you call perplexity. You want to have a test. They say, now suppose I converge on a number of topics and I have new papers coming. I want to make sure that the model is not surprised. My model with the theta star and the number of topics I had is not surprised by the arrival of new papers, okay? And so that's of course, the lower the perplexity, the better the model generalizes to unseen data. You see, because you don't want to be surprised when new publications you've never seen before are coming in. So you have a trade-off. If you have a very small number of topics, the benefit of adding one more topic is high because the model is rough and each new topic covers meaningful part of the data that was not captured before. So there is enormous room for surprise. And so, yeah, 10 minutes, yeah. And therefore, you want to add topics because the marginal benefit is bigger than the cost. When K is large, you don't gain much by adding topics because you will pick weaker and weaker distinctions between papers, but you will keep adding fixed cost. So the way it works is that if you look at perplexity net of fixed cost, you get something like a U. Well, it's not quite a U, but you can see that you optimize at approximately 90 topics, you see? So the K star is the smallest K beyond which perplexity net of fixed cost stops decreasing when you keep increasing the number of topics. And we get 90 topics. And we generate them endogenously. And then once we generate them, we have the theta star corresponding. That's the whole thing. So instead of taking from jail, we generate the topics ourselves with machine learning. Okay? So when you got that, now we harvest. Okay? So we start first from a list of journals, which is the one provided by CNRS, but you could get from anything. And we restrict attention to journals classified in general economics or specialized economics. We expand the list to include the top 300 journals in the Science Mago list of best ranked journals. And we select journals available in OpenAlex that are in English and provide information on abstract. We end up with 365 journals associated with 362,600 papers. Okay, so I keep going. And now I will get 3 pieces of evidence. First, the popularity. The share of total publications accounted for by a topic. We got particular topic now. You see, we generated them. So then I will show that you get bell shape most of the time. I will show there is no evidence of global decline, and I will show evidence of constant emergence of new ideas. Okay, so let me go there. First, I mean, what we show is that among the topics, the 90 topics, 62 can be roughly described as having a bell shape. The influence of the topic has a bell shape, and you will see that, for example, exchange rates. Okay. 13 topics are either like increasing or decreasing. You could say that's part of a bell shape. And you have 15 topics that are not unimodal and have a reset at some point. For example, international trade. And I make always the joke, thanks to Trump, you revive the topic. Okay? Or the financial crisis revived, the finance and macro topic. And let me show you some graphs. Here is real exchange rate movement. That's a topic. Okay, that's a bell-shaped. Another one, price inflation, commodity, nominal retail. That's a kind of bell shape. And I will show you here is, voilà, finance, reform, crisis, credit. That's one which is increasing, very with the crisis. You can see that? And you have here two theory, but you have very much the bell shape. So what you find is that overall, except for some exceptions, and we know some of them are linked to events, it's mostly a bell shape. The influence follows a bell shape. So within topic, Chad Jones is right. It seems that the influence is rising, and then the relative influence tend to eventually decline, okay? But now, let me show you, since I don't have much time, the fact that there is no decreasing alors I could look at the global growth of ideas, not the influence, but the total number of papers. And what you see is that in terms of relative influence, you go up and down. But in terms of number of publications, citation, you keep going up, except that you go up like an S-curve. You see, it's really not very up. Then you accelerate around the peak of influence, and then you still grow, but at a slow rate. So it's not that the number goes down. You keep producing, but you produce like an S, and in terms of influence, it's bell-shaped, okay? Now, I'm almost done. Let me go to quality, because to say, because you could tell me, well, but it's not surprising, we have more researchers in economics, you have many more people, we can see that, but we look at quality. You have various measures of quality. One is citations. Okay, you could look at citations. What you can see is that there is no evidence that publications are becoming more incremental relative to their peak of the influence. They keep citations keep rising. You see what I mean? And if you look relative to peak, you can see citations keep rising. Okay, so they are not becoming more incremental. I mean, the average, that's the average publication relative to peak year. Okay, they're not. You don't see that you have a decreased influence. There is another one, originality and generality. You can see that relative to peak, generality and originality keeps increasing. So it could be that there are more researchers, but you could be saying, well, on average, they are not original. Originality and generality keeps rising. And also what's interesting, you can look at backward similarity and forward. You would like your paper to have forward similarity, Martin. You want subsequent papers to be like you, but I want to be able to say that you are not like previous. Okay, that's what you want. And that's exactly what you see. You can see that the backward similarity does not trend upward, but the forward similarity trends upward. So you have this measure that in those terms, citation, generality, originality, forward citation, you are moving up. You are not running out of ideas that are original and fruitful. And finally, this is important, is a reset. You know, how do we look at reset? I say, take a paper and take the leading two topics. I know the one with the highest theta, star. So that's a combination of theta. Suppose that for 10 years in a row, you have papers that have those same two topics as top topics. So that means that that combination of topic is a new combination that is lasting. I can take it seriously. I look over time at the number of new topics of that kind. So the appearance of new topic, that it will be a combination of two topics in a paper, but other papers for 10 years in a row will have these topics as top topics. And you see that there is no decline, you see, in terms of what I call the new combination of topics measured that way. You reset the innovation clock. You see, so that's what I want to say. So the conclusion is that, you see, and now we are working on chemistry, and we will do physics and biotech, and that's what we are currently doing. So overall, Gordon and Jones and are rightly point out that ideas become maybe harder to find within particularly fields and topics, yet due to innovation reset, ideas may no longer be harder to find overall, as argued by Mokir. And therefore, we reconcile them. I think each of them has something to show. Alors, I wanted just to show a last figure about AI. How long do I have? Minus how much? 2 minutes. Why do I think AI will even reinforce this? AI should increase growth for at least two reasons. AI automate tasks in the production of goods and services. And we've seen papers today on AI and task automating production of goods and services. But also, as we argued with Chad Jones and Ben Jones, ideas automate, AI automate tasks in the production of ideas. It makes ideas easier to find. And with AI, very often, new ideas are recombination of old ideas. Martin Weissman, Chad Jones himself have shown the importance of recombining growth. You can recombine much more and much faster with AI, okay? So we try to, now in current work, you see, if it was just automating production of goods and services, you would go from the dotted line for the GDP to the red line. For 10 years in a row, you grow at 0.7 percentage point higher per year over a 10-year period. But in fact, you are not at the red line. You are the blue line because you have the extra, which is ideas harder, easier to find with AI, which makes growth rate permanently higher. You are steeper than the dotted line. And just to give you something there, that's an exercise that Antonin did, so something we are discussing. He took all patents granted in the US between 2010 and 2025, excluding those that pertain to AI and internet and computing. And from this, he creates a panel at the CPC4 quarter level. So he looks at each quarter. And then you have the various, technologies within the CPC4. And for each individual technology within CPC4, you define a time-invariant AI exposure, the extent to which overall this technology was exposed to AI, okay? And then you run a regression like this, where you look at the count of patents, but you could say the count of citations, and how it will depend upon the extent to which your field is exposed. You see, also cites, you see, AI patents. You see what I mean? And is exposed to AI. And the interesting thing is this, you see, AI, in fact, boosts the production of new patents, and you could do that with citations. You see what I mean? And in fact, wherever the influence of AI become more important, it boosts the production of citation of ideas. So that's really evidence that it boosts the production of ideas. And in fact, you see a 0.1 unit increase in pre-period 006 exposure, which is exposure to AI, okay, is associated with roughly 27% more granted patents in 2024 within the same CPC3 quarter cell. So it means really something very important. And now we are in the business of trying to quantify the extra amount of growth that will come from AI. So already, even without AI, ideas overall are not harder to find. They're harder to find within topics. But with AI, it will be even more true, of course. And that's what now we are trying to quantify. How much more easier AI will be to find, and how extra growth this will give us. Of course, there are headwinds on growth, on the growth potential of AI. One is limited human capital. The other one is inappropriate competition policy. If we end up with one or two firms monopolizing the AI sector, they will end up discouraging new entry, like we showed with Yui, Pete, Antonin, and Timo with the IT technology. So I am optimistic on the technology. Where I'm not optimistic is on the institution. Shall we be able to build the schools, the schooling system, and the competition policy that will allow us to harness the growth potential of AI? That's why I'm less optimistic. But in general, growth ideas are not harder to find. With AI, will be even much easier to find, provided we put in place the appropriate institutions and policies. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Philippe. So we have time for maybe 2-3 short questions. Who would like to ask the first question? And while you think about a question, let me ask one to Philippe. So say you were in charge of the European Commission and you were allowed to make one change to European policy when it comes to growth. What would that one change be?
The 28th state, the 28th country, the one where you have no, gold plating, because you are facing, regulation, the good market, the market for goods and services, you have regulation. Each country has its own regulation. You have all kinds of barriers. We are very good in France in innovating in red tape. We are great producer of red tape in France. You avoid the red tape if you go to the 28th state. I would say the 28th state.
And are you confident it's going to happen this year?
That I'm very bad predictor. But there seem to be something moving in that direction. But I know Luis is there. Luis is on top of that. Luis, is it happening or not yet? Alors, if you're not optimistic, nobody should be optimistic. You should be optimistic. You are there to be optimistic. Come on, I mean, Luis. No, no. Look, I will tell you something. I think things will happen because Putin and Trump are there to help us. We have the bad witch and the good witch. The bad witches are Trump, and enfin, maybe he's a great guy, but he's pushing us. Quoi. Voilà, he's saying, I don't say the bad witch, but he's pushing us. He said, you Europeans, you are really bad, stupid, and everything. Putin is also, and you have Mark Carney. Mark Carney tells us, if you move, I am with you. So I hope that with this, power, we will, and we have the Draghi report that Luis and I, we work a lot with, the Letta report, and we know now what to do. And my feeling is that we have fantastic resources in Europe, and we have everything to make it happen. Amazing. Luis, do you agree with that? Yes.
So we have one question here. But Luis, do you want to say something? Do you want to add something?
Luis, add something, please.
No, I think you're doing an amazing job at pushing Europe to move forward. So I don't have anything to add. I would maybe ask you, because you've been thinking about this a lot since 2008 at least. What about the university system? We are in a place where they did a lot of institutional engineering to get the Barcelona School of Economics going in a pretty hostile context, but they managed. Andreu and others. What does Europe need to do to get ideas in universities?
Yeah, I'll tell you what we need more. You see, to do breakthrough, the Draghi and the Letta and other reports, they make the same diagnostic. We don't do enough breakthrough high-tech innovations in Europe. Breakthrough high-tech innovations are happening mainly in the US and now in China. And to be able to do breakthrough innovation, you'll be able to fail. It's important to have the possibility to fail. In my school years, we could not fail. Whenever we were doing something wrong, we would put a donkey helmet on our head. That was not good. I don't recommend that. In research, to fail, you need long-term research finance. So in France, there is one thing that worked really well, Laboratoire d'Excellence. We had international juries selecting laboratory projects for 10 years, because ERC grants are for 5 years. After 3 years, you already have to start filling up a new application. So 10 years finance, long-term research finance, they have that in the US and they have that in China. Then people can take risk and they can fail. We need more LabEx, Laboratoire d'Excellence. We need more long-term research finance. I think that would be a key message, because this way you can take risk and you can generate breakthrough innovations. I think that would be the one thing I would push through, long-term research funding and secured, because whenever there is a budgetary problem in France, they cut on research because researchers, they don't block highways. They are obsessed by the highway between Paris and Charles de Gaulle Airport. The taxi cabs, they block the highways. The researchers, they don't block the highways.
Thank you very much for the talk. It's very motivational, especially after a talk like this. I feel like all these guys have come up with everything, so it's nice to know that maybe we can find ideas in the future as well. But my question is about the fact that it is people who come up with these ideas, and they combine with people in different fields, and that's how they're able to generate this innovation. So on the aggregate, maybe AI is making ideas easier to find, but then what can we do to make sure that we have people meeting in the right place and then being able to exploit this benefit, people from different fields and different backgrounds?
To provide incentives to go into research, to make research. That's why you need, to have this funding to make it attractive for people to go into innovative activities. You also need a labor market with AI will be very important. So you need, long-term university funding. You need, for startups, we lack venture capital, and for restaking. And restaking larger firms, we lack institutional investors. I did some work with John Van Rienen and Luigi Zingales showing, the importance of pension funds, mutual funds, for inducing restaking by managers of larger firms. The problem is that we don't have enough, except maybe in Sweden, we don't have enough institutional investors, and they invest in the US. You should tell them you will be taxed like crazy if you don't invest in Europe. You should invest in Europe projects. There are plenty of fantastic high-tech projects in Europe, and they can't access even the little amount of institutional investment and venture capital we have, because they all go and invest in the US. And there, I think there is something that's not right.
So we have one more question. Everyone wants to go to dinner, Philippe, and otherwise I'm worried I might become dinner. So, you had a question?
Yeah. Let me ask you let me bring the level down and ask you a more modest question. We have evidence in the US across sectors that the rate of entry of new firms, the creation of new firms, has been going down for the last 30
Yes,
years.
yes.
Do you see that as some kind of evidence that ideas are harder to find or not?
No, no. My own explanation, it's not my own, and we worked on that. You know, there's been various, and we're not alone, by the way. But Ufuk Aksigit and Sina Ates have been working on that, and we have done work with Yui, who is here, and Timo, Pete, and Antonin, saying that, you know, with the IT revolution, you had the emergence of superstar firms. And you saw that, by the way, in the work of Autor, Van Rienen et al. And they expanded. In fact, they expanded by having many new establishments. We can see the rate of growth of establishment is bigger for larger firms than for smaller firms. They did a lot of M&A, and competition policy did not adapt. They never said, they worried whether, you know, a merger and acquisition would stifle future innovation, future entry. They never insisted on data sharing. So you ended up with superstar firms that ended up discouraging new entry. And that's what happened. And the worry with AI is that if you look at the cloud, it's dominated by Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. So you need a true competition policy on AI. But you also need industrial policy in Europe to develop computing centers. But that's the thing. So it's really the Schumpeterian conundrum that I mentioned at the beginning. You have these superstar firms, they innovate, but they end up discouraging entry of new firms. And that's not because ideas are harder to find. It's just because they're just discouraging. They make it less profitable for new firms to come in. And that's why both you can find that in our paper, and Aksigit Ates take another, you know, use a step-by-step innovation model to make, to also go wrong. Say that data sharing has been going down, and so the gap between leaders and followers has gone up, which means that you discourage the followers from catching up, or the new entrants, and also the leaders. Let's say, well, you know, the gap between me and the potential entrants and followers has gone so big that I can rest on my laurels. You see, I don't have to worry that much. Very much this kind of explanation, I think.
Thanks very much, Philippe.
I will tell you something. I failed a lot of things in my life. One thing was the agrégation de mathématiques. You have the agrégation de mathématiques, no? You don't have. You look like having. I failed the agrégation de mathématiques. And you know, I was interviewed by a radio called France Culture 3 months ago, and I explained the fact that I failed many things, which was very helpful for me. I mentioned the Society of Fellows. I mentioned all the, petites amies didn't want me, and then I went to the US, you know, by love failure. And I mentioned the agrégation de mathématiques. And the agrégation de mathématiques, I failed it. And she told me, it's very funny because my father is a mathematician. And she gave me the name and said, he's the one who failed me. And we called him and said, he was adorable on the phone, I can tell you. And I said, thank you for failing me, because failure. So, you know, in life, you know, luck and failures, you know, there is some of it. But when you feel, and life is done of many headwinds and very surprising events, but when you feel, I always had this obsession of getting people and countries out of poverty, because poverty is something I never accepted, never. And that was one thing. And the other thing is when I felt with Peter Howitt that we had something, the lambda n log of gamma, the lambda z log of gamma thing, I felt we had something, and I clung to it. You see, I said, I will never give it up. And it was 38 years with all kinds of headwinds, all kinds of, you know, many things happen in your life. But I knew that I would never give up. And I think it's very important that you have strong conviction, you want to push strong things, and then you never give up. Because there are many reasons to give up, to change, to yield to fashions, you see what I mean? And it's very important to be persistent and resilient. I think that's maybe the one thing that I learned through this. It was a kind of a never give up. And I think that that's something I learned from the whole story. Thank you so much.